Alright, hey everyone, this is Vishal from Uncharted Effects. Before we begin, if you like the video, please give it a like, and if you enjoy my content, please subscribe if you haven't already subscribed to the channel. What a week last week, and it seems that I am saying this almost every week, but this is the type of times that we are living in. On the geopolitical front, we had the whole Iran issue. So we'll just take a look at oil while I discuss a bit about Iran. But it came out that unmanned drone was shot down by the Iranians, and President Trump essentially was considering taking action. He was saying, that we'll be seeing action very soon. And what ended up happening was it came out that President Trump gave the order with 10 minutes to spare for American bombers to turn around before they reach that point of no return. And essentially he said it was because the Iranians shot down an unmanned aircraft, while the American retaliation would have killed around 150 Iranians. And he said that it was a bit disproportionate that, they took down an unmanned aircraft while the Americans hit, would cause 150 casualties and deaths. Think of it what you will. I think it might have had to be more to do with what the Russians might have done in terms of retaliation. A lot of people don't think the Russians would do anything. However, I think Iran is a key node for them, as well as the Chinese, who are trying to hit dollar demand, and that's what it's all about. The Iranians accept all currencies for their oil except the US dollar, and they've been taking market share away from the Saudis and other Gulf states, who only take American dollars for their oil. And as the US dollar gets stronger, you'll see this increase more and more. We'll talk about the dollar just in a minute, but before we move on to the dollar, back to Iran quickly. What do I think is going to happen? I've been saying I think a lot of the American warhawks and strategists, they know that they have to protect US dollar demand. If the Chinese do want to sell off American debt, there's a lot of buyers right now. So that's why I think China has to target US dollar demand first. I think they're doing this through Iran, and hopefully they hope that when Venezuela gets back to production, I'm quite sure Maduro will be saying the same sort of thing, where Venezuela will not accept US dollars. So that's sort of their game plan. And the Russians are, getting involved as well. So basically, I think this strike on Iran will be happening. I still believe it will be happening. When, who knows? A lot of people talk about, World War III, and when that's going to start, but you have to admit that we probably are already in it. We've had, we're having currency wars, trade wars, cyber wars. All that's remaining is the shooting war. So even if things aren't getting destroyed, it doesn't mean we're not in some sort of war. So I think it's already happening, and generally happens when, a civilization or empire is near the peak of its decadent cycle, and we can make arguments that the Americans are there, the West is there. So what do I think will happen? I think we'll probably see some sort of other event occur in Iran, and then a lot of the Washington warhawks and other maybe media and politicians will be saying, see, President Trump, you should have acted. This is all your fault because you didn't act by sending those bombers to send a message. This is all a result of your non-action or inaction, sorry. And essentially the president will be forced to act. So that's what I see coming. Here we're looking at oil, and you can see we had that nice pop, but just using our strategy and just looking at trends and a range proved why we would have gone long oil. So a nice little trade there. For the dollar, if you look at the dollar, and this is where the other story comes in, and that was the Federal Reserve interest rate decision, sort of being overshadowed now due to this geopolitical issue with Iran. But essentially, the Fed didn't cut rates. However, they came out very dovish, and now the percentage for a rate cut in July has gone to 100%. But the debate is whether it's going to be a 25 basis point cut or a 50 basis point cut. Again, if you're looking at the 10-year and the Fed funds rate, we're probably going to see a 50 basis point cut. And essentially, this meeting was all laying the foundations for this cut. The market expects that cut. A lot of people expect the cut. And I think it was quite suspicious that Mario Draghi from the ECB came out a day before the cut to say, hey, look, the ECB is going to lower rates even more, and we're going to provide even more cheap money, which caused stock markets to pop and also yields to drop. So essentially, the Federal Reserve was accomplishing their goals with this meeting via the ECB. And I'm not saying there's some sort of collusion or anything, but I find it suspicious that he could have just waited for the, until the Fed spoke. But that's neither here nor there. So if you look at the dollar, we have our first lower high here in this new downtrend swing. I expect maybe another lower high, and before we test 95, I think this move is all about, now everyone is expecting the rate cuts to happen. But I have to stress, even when the cuts do happen, I still think the dollar is going to go higher, just because Canada is going to be cutting rates, Australia is going to be cutting rates, Europe is already negative, Japan negative, Switzerland negative. So I still think the dollar is still going to get a bid, and just because it is that reserve currency, and their treasury still yield a positive, right, for now. So I think there will still be a demand for dollars, and if their markets do continue going higher, more dollars will be bought just to invest into the American market by overseas managers. So let's see how this move plays out. If we do break below 95 here, then I might start beginning to change my stance on what the dollar is going to do. But let's see how this all plays with the dollar. I think this is all, like I said, just a move being priced in for that rate cut. And then after that, let's see what happens. It will be very entertaining. So the S&P, we briefly closed above new all-time highs. I still think we're going to do it just because, where else are you going to go, right, for yield? If bonds are yielding very low, real estate, are you going to go into real estate when rate cuts are coming? When rate cuts are coming, generally they come in twos or threes. So you'd probably want to wait till all the cuts happen before you buy real estate. So I think the markets are still going to be where the money's going to go. Of course, precious metals and all that kind of stuff, other depressed assets. But watch the markets. I think they're still going to be going higher, even though we're going to have some pullbacks here and there. And it's all going to be buoyed by the Fed, right? So I've been saying this for a long time, but I believe the central bank's new mandate is to keep assets propped up, and it seems like that's what they're doing. That's what's really important to them, and I think they're going to continue providing this cheap money, do what they have to, QE or whatever, just to keep things going up. And eventually, it's not going to end well, but let's see what happens. Here I'm looking at the S&P on the 2-hour chart. As we said, that we did break into all-time new highs just for a brief, a few minutes. No, not a few minutes, maybe a couple hours. And now essentially we have this nice uptrend, and we're beginning to stall a bit here on the 2-hour chart. I see this long wick here, so I'm watching this level personally, the 2930 zone, as my flip zone here, support and resistance. Hopefully make some sort of pattern, maybe a lower high. And again, this is just going to be a trade. I still think markets will go up, but there will be pullbacks here and there. The German DAX, just very simple, and we'll do it very quickly, near an uptrend that was close to a resistance zone. And now we've created this beautiful head and shoulders pattern. Really like it. You guys all know head and shoulders are my favorite, so I really like what I'm seeing there. So let's talk about gold. I know I've been talking about this a lot on my blog and social media, but this level that we broke above on the weekly with a very nice strong break, very telling in my opinion. Again, I believe gold is more of a confidence crisis hedge. A lot of people argue, it's an inflation hedge, right? Because when real rates are yielding zero or negative, you might as well hold gold, right? So I still argue that, inflation and hyperinflation, that kind of stuff is products of a confidence crisis. But that's maybe a conversation for a different time. But nonetheless, gold had a very nice break here on the weekly. So what do I expect? I want to see one more week of maintaining these levels. Expect maybe some sort of a pullback and then a higher low being formed, but that's healthy. That's what we want to see, because we want to see this level above 1360 being held for this break. So let's see what happens. This could easily just reverse. I hope it doesn't, right? Because I really like, I'm a gold bug. But well, I mean, I'm not a big gold bug, but I'm just looking at this in terms of where price action is and how a lot of gold assets have been underperforming, and I think it's a good sector to be in. And I mean, I have a thing for precious metals. I have more of a classical economics background, and yeah, silver as well. I think silver is still one of the most depressed and cheapest hard asset you can buy. This is a bit telling. Silver hasn't really followed, well, it's moved, right? But, not in terms of what its older brother gold is doing. So let's see if we can do that. This was a trade I took last week. We got our first higher low here, and we're at a flip zone here. That's been support and resistance. So I closed my position. However, it's very possible to make another higher low before we go a bit higher, move higher. So I'm watching silver. I want to see more follow through just to sort of convince me that gold is doing quite well. Generally it is gold that leads though, but I want to see a lot more money running into silver as well. It sort of tells me maybe people are just running into gold just for a trade, not really for the long term. So it's silver can be very telling, so we'll keep an eye out on that. Copper, been talking about this for a while. We got our break finally, very strong break. And now just looking for our first higher low to be made before we continue the trend up. Very nice break. But now, again, like I said, we want to see some follow through here. Here's this level here at the 270, 80 zone, let's call it, where I want to see a candle close above. Pound US dollar. So we spoke about this in the past with the head and shoulders back here. Left shoulder, head, right shoulder that never broke through. However, it seems that we are getting a second attempt to a second head and shoulders with a left shoulder, head, and perhaps here a right shoulder being formed. Watching this zone, the 2750 zone. Let's see if we'll break at a very good sort of support zone as well. And if the dollar continues its move lower to 95, I expect this might continue a bit higher. Euro pound, always talk about this recently, but the same criteria and strategy still applies. Perhaps we're going to see some sort of right shoulder here before we continue lower, so I'm watching that. But this is one pair, the US yen is one that I find a bit more interesting. If you watch Francis Hunt's work, The Market Sniper, he talks about how he believes the yen might outperform the US dollar in terms of a safe haven currency, and it's strictly due to the fact that the Japanese people still save their money. They have like one of the highest saving rates, whereas the American citizen doesn't really save, and most of them are indebted. I think something like 50% are like living paycheck to paycheck, or one paycheck away from being broke. So the Americans, they rely on other countries buying their debt, whereas the Japanese can support their debt due to their high level of savings. So he believes that the yen will do quite well. And it's interesting, again, just seeing gold move up higher, because yen and gold have a bit of a correlation that not many people talk about. But we did close on the daily chart below this major flip zone level, support and resistance here, which I think can be very telling on what's coming in this geopolitical and economic future right now. Very strong break, had a bit of a retest, so let's see if we can hold this level. But as long as we're below this swing here at around 187 108.70. This has quite some down, it has quite some room to the downside, maybe the 105 zone. So very telling. It's not really something that I trade in terms of trend trading, in terms of trend reversal trading, However, where we are economically, seeing what we're seeing in gold, I believe this is a very important break, and we shall see what happens. A lot of the yen pairs, I'm not going to cover them all, but they're all near very big support zones. However, they're still bottoming and making a pattern, whereas the Swiss yen sort of has made a nice sort of pattern here, and we had this breakout. However, it happened on a Friday, so I'm watching this just to see how price will react on the open. Perhaps maybe we'll make another higher low or a retest before moving higher, but I do like this break on the Swiss yen, and it has some good room to the upside, even on the 4-hour and even on the daily, in my opinion. So again, good looking chart. A lot of the yen pairs, like I said, are at or near support levels. Let's see how they react. Waiting for some sort of pattern to be made, to show a move up higher. So we'll be patient on that. Let's look here, not the euro. Let's look at the pound CAD. So a few pound pairs this week. Pound CAD is also close to a very big support zone here as well. What I'm going to do is I'm watching it here on the 4-hour, and I'd like to see this swing break. So this is a swing at like 168.80. It would be nice to see perhaps we come to retest, make a right shoulder, a higher low, and then shoot out, and that way we even have our own head and shoulders pattern that can be developed. So ideally that's what I'd like to see on the pound CAD, but it's at a very important support zone. So is pound Swissy. However, just because it's here at this level doesn't mean anything's about to happen. We'd like to see some sort of bottoming pattern, perhaps a head and shoulder or something being made, double bottom, and we don't have that quite yet. Same can be said about the New Zealand CAD on the daily, where we are at a big major flip zone, support level, flip zone level here, and got a bit of a big, a large wick telling us the buyers are here. However, we need to see some sort of pattern being made before we can decide to go long. And Aussie CAD, engulfing candle. I believe pound Swiss also, not pound Swiss, pound CAD also had an engulfing candle. So this is quite telling. However, I still ideally like to see some sort of pattern. Aussie CAD also at a very important support level, and even breaking it down on the 4-hour. I'd like to see this zone here break. Perhaps for more context, we'll make a higher low before we break out, but you can see here it was ranging for a bit, which I like. Even on the 2-hour, you can see that we price stalled here because of the range, and a very, very nice breakout after with 2 strong green candles, and on the 4-hour a very big engulfing candle here, so telling us that there is strength here and giving us a move. However, just for some more context, perhaps maybe make a higher low before we move up higher. Finally, let's talk about Ripple. Don't really have much to say on Bitcoin, but Ripple, I like what we're seeing here. We had this big pop, finally made our first higher low here with this close above 47. So this is the higher low we're working with. So as you can see, swings aren't always pretty and not always textbook. Sometimes they'll lag around like this, but we created finally our first swing here, and essentially, there's a lot of room to the upside, perhaps even up to 70 and even up to the $1 zone. So a lot of room here on Ripple. There's been a big sort of push onto cryptocurrencies recently. I think it's more to do with Chinese money trying to leave China and going into Bitcoin. But let's see what happens. Right now, Bitcoin obviously is the king right now, so that's why I'm putting more emphasis on that Chinese fundamental basically analysis. And this is what people like Kyle Bass have said, where China's doing very poorly right now, and a lot of money is now trying to get out of China. They did it before with Bitcoin, and I believe when Bitcoin went up to 20K, like 90% of that volume was like Chinese volume. You're seeing what's happening in Hong Kong right now. Generally, a lot of mainlanders could buy property in Hong Kong and then use the capital gains to move overseas or whatever. Even though Hong Kong is sort of like technically a state within a state in China, they follow British law. So different, like, law code, which is how mainlanders used to get money out of China. And then Bitcoin came along, and then the government basically came down on Bitcoin. And now you see what's happening in Hong Kong, where the Chinese are trying to impose their laws, like Chinese state law, extradition laws in Hong Kong. So it's losing that British law where the individual has like certain rights. And I've heard like a lot of Hong Kong citizens are leaving Hong Kong because of this. So this is probably why Bitcoin is getting more of a bid, because now the government is closing up on everything in China. So with cryptos and through Hong Kong, so perhaps Bitcoin and cryptos become another way to get money out of the country. So again, very nice, very good week coming up ahead. This is just the state of the world. We've been talking about this for quite some time. I've been talking about it on my blog and my social media for some time. So if you haven't checked those out, please do. But other than that, have a good week and happy trading.